21-ാം നൂറ്റാണ്ടിൻ്റെ മറ്റൊരു ലക്കത്തിലേക്ക് സ്വാഗതം. നാം ജീവിക്കുന്ന ലോകത്തിലെ വിവിധ ജനാധിപത്യ രാഷ്ട്രങ്ങൾ നേരിടുന്ന വെല്ലുവിളികളും ആ ജനാധിപത്യങ്ങൾ മുന്നോട്ട് വയ്ക്കുന്ന സാധ്യതകളുമാണ് ഈ ലക്കം 21-ാം നൂറ്റാണ്ട് ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുന്നത്. ലോകമാകമാനം ലിബറൽ ജനാധിപത്യ രാജ്യങ്ങളിലാകമാനം തീവ്ര വലതുപക്ഷ ശക്തികൾ പിടിമുറുക്കുന്ന ഒരു കാലത്താണ് നാം ജീവിക്കുന്നത്. അത് യൂറോപ്പിലായിക്കോട്ടെ, ജനാധിപത്യ മൂല്യങ്ങൾ ലോക സംസ്കാരത്തിന് നൽകിയ യൂറോപ്പിലായിക്കട്ടെ, ഏഷ്യയിലാകട്ടെ, ആഫ്രിക്കയിലാകട്ടെ, എല്ലായിടങ്ങളിലും ജനാധിപത്യം ചില വെല്ലുവിളികളെ നേരിടുകയും തീവ്ര വലതുപക്ഷ ശക്തികൾ ശക്തിപ്പെടുകയും ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു കാലത്താണ് നാം ജീവിക്കുന്നത്. ഇതേക്കുറിച്ച് സംസാരിക്കുവാനായി നമ്മുടെ കൂടെ ഇന്ന് അതിഥിയായിട്ടുള്ളത് ഇന്ത്യയിലെ തന്നെ ഏറ്റവും വലിയ സാമൂഹ്യ ശാസ്ത്രജ്ഞരിൽ ഒരാളായ, രാഷ്ട്രീയ മനഃശാസ്ത്രജ്ഞരിൽ ഒരാളായ പ്രൊഫസർ ആശീഷ് നന്ദിയാണ്. ഇന്ത്യൻ മതേതരത്വത്തെക്കുറിച്ചും ഹിന്ദുത്വ പദ്ധതിയെക്കുറിച്ചും ആധുനിക ജനാധിപത്യത്തെക്കുറിച്ചും യൂറോപ്യൻ കൊളോണിയലിസത്തെക്കുറിച്ചുമൊക്കെ വിശദമായി പഠനങ്ങൾ നടത്തിയിട്ടുള്ള ആളാണ് പ്രൊഫസർ ആശീഷ് നന്ദി. അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ നിരവധി പുസ്തകങ്ങൾ നമ്മുടെ കയ്യിൽ അവൈലബിളാണ്. ഞാനതിൻ്റെ പൂർണ്ണമായ ലിസ്റ്റൊന്നും തരുന്നില്ല. 1983 എഴുതിയ ദ ഇൻറ്റിമേറ്റ് എനിമി ലോസ് ആൻഡ് റിക്കവറി ഓഫ് സെൽഫ് അണ്ടർ കൊളോണിയലിസം, 1983 എഴുതിയ സയൻസ്, ഹെജിമണി ആൻഡ് വയലൻസ്, എ റിക്വയം ഫോർ മോഡേണിറ്റി, 1987 എഴുതിയ ട്രഡീഷൻസ്, ടിറനി ആൻഡ് ഉട്ടോപ്പിയാസ്, എസേസ് ഇൻ പൊളിറ്റിക്കൽ അവെയർനെസ്, 1993 എഴുതിയ ബാർബറിക് അതേഴ്സ്, എ മാനിഫെസ്റ്റോ ഓൺ വെസ്റ്റേൺ റേസിസം തുടങ്ങിയ നിരവധി പുസ്തകങ്ങളുണ്ട്. 2007 ഇറങ്ങിയ എ വെരി പോപ്പുലർ എക്സൈൽ തുടങ്ങിയ പുസ്തകങ്ങൾ വരെ. ഏറ്റവും അവസാനമായി അദ്ദേഹം എഴുതിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത് ഗാന്ധിയെക്കുറിച്ചുള്ള അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ പുസ്തകത്തിൻ്റെ സമാഹാരമാണ്. വെൽക്കം ടു 21-ാം നൂറ്റാണ്ട്. ഇൻ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് the 21st century. Welcome to this program, Professor Ashish Nandi. In the world today, there are more than 103 democratic countries, and compared to 1970s, it was just less than 50 countries where we had active democracies. But at the same time, the present day world is encountering a lot of problems when it comes to the liberal democratic world. Many liberal democratic world in the Europe are inclining towards the right-wing politics and all. What do you think? What are the major challenges being faced by the liberal democracies all over the world?
This is tall order, but I would first draw your attention to the fact that the situation is somewhat like the situation of the expanding middle class in India. The new middle class is roughly 5 times or a little more, 7 times the size of the middle class which existed at the time of independence. But this middle class today doesn't have the presence and the influence which the middle class had at the time of independence, despite its large size. This is because the new middle class is primarily consists primarily of people who have middle class money but not middle class values. So they are a middle class only in name, and the middle class is failing to do the duty of a middle class which traditionally the middle class did. So in the case of democracy also, about my rough guess is this at the moment, that at least 2/5, between 2/5 and 3/5 of the democracies, not 3/5, I would, that is too much, 2/5 of the democracy, that is roughly 40% of democracies, have problems about being democratic. And previously, the non-democratic states were not clever enough to call themselves democracy. They called themselves by other names, National Socialists, like in Nazism, or in Italy and other countries of that kind, or monarchies and so on and so forth. But now, many of the democracies have learned to use democratic means to throw up authoritarian regimes. And this is true of a large number of countries in the world today. So apparently they are democratic, but in substance they are not. Similarly, in Southeast Asia, we have reasons to doubt whether we can call any country truly liberal democracy, which is the term you are using. They claim to be democracies, pass off as democracies, have friends who are not often democratic, but also are linked to other countries which believe that their support is important as allies. And therefore, they are tolerated as democracies. Nobody openly says that they are authoritarian. European liberal democracy is not functioning in Europe. In Hungary, it is not certainly liberal democracy. And it is doubtful if in Italy now there will be liberal democracy. And so on and so forth. But can go on giving examples of this kind of things. And I have a feeling that this art of capturing a democracy by being a part of democracy, launching yourself as a party and entering and it began with Germany. They captured power from Weimar Republic through democratic means and then talked of democracy as almost a disease of cancer. So, same is the case in South Asia. I don't think today any country can be called a liberal democracy. There is no attempt to use colonial acts to put the opposition behind bars.
You are giving in details the problems being faced by the Indian democracy, the democracies in the Asian countries, the South Asian countries, and even in Africa, certainly about the Europe and all. But my question is whether it is essential to think that the European liberal democratic values have to stay.
Yes, I think at least some examples of living in a strong liberal democracy is good for the rest of the world. At least the hope remains for the next generation to be actualized. So they do not only have to say, oh, this is the way the world runs nowadays. They can also say, no, but some parts of the world do not run that way. That itself is strength. I mean, the technology developed by many of the countries, particularly the East Asian successful economic countries, which within a very quick time developed very fast, and we were always trying to imitate that. Now they are fully imitating them. They had a name for that. There was a famous Australian scholar who is now dead. He called them repressive developmentalist regimes because they used the slogan of development and free market to hoodwink their supporters into come to power, and after coming to power, they become full-fledged authoritarian states. And I would feel that I would have liked at least one fully liberal democratic country to survive in this region for others to look up to.
And do you consider India as a model?
No, it has not lived up to that model at all. I mean, where the ruling party's president can openly say in public that opposition is not needed, and over the next few years you will see that all the opposition parties have become extinct with some pride.
സ്വേച്ഛാധിപത്യ ഏകാധിപത്യ രാജ്യങ്ങളായി മാറിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ജനാധിപത്യ ലോകത്തെക്കുറിച്ചാണ് നാം സംസാരിച്ചു കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. തീവ്ര വലതുപക്ഷത്തേക്ക് നീങ്ങിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ലോക ജനാധിപത്യങ്ങളെക്കുറിച്ചാണ് നാം സംസാരിച്ചു കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. ഇനി ദേശീയത എന്നത് ജനാധിപത്യത്തെ എങ്ങനെയാണ് ശക്തിപ്പെടുത്തുന്നത് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ദുർബലപ്പെടുത്തുന്നത് എന്ന വിഷയത്തെക്കുറിച്ചാണ് പ്രൊഫസർ ആശീഷ് നന്ദി നമ്മോട് സംസാരിക്കുവാൻ പോകുന്നത്. പ്രൊഫസർ നന്ദി, വാട്ട് ഡു യു തിങ്ക് വെദർ നാഷണലിസം, ദ നാഷണൽ ഫീലിംഗ് ഈസ് ആൻ അസറ്റ് ഫോർ any democracy?
Frankly speaking, national pride for a nation is only possible when there is a nation. The countries in India have not fully become nations, and I do not think a large country like India, or for that matter Pakistan, can ever become fully a nation, because these countries are built on a different grounds. If you look carefully, you will find that these countries live with communities, and each community, these communities intersect with other communities. In other words, you have one community as an agriculturalist, another community as of language, and third community of a particular kind of profession you pursue, and these intersecting communities give a sense of unity. That was our sense of unity. That is why Gandhi talked of village as a republic, each village as a republic, and it was the kind of unity which India was an expert in, because it has lived with that for centuries, from medieval times. And this idea was given up because in 19th century, where colonialism came, they had in the meanwhile had a nation. They popularized the concept of a nation state, and we all wanted to be a nation state because we thought that is the new thing to do. This is a part of modernization. And there has not been a serious critique of them, except occasionally some comments by some thinking persons like Gandhi saying that a village republic is the basic unit of Indian civilization, or Tagore saying that we don't have a nation. Here is a person, national poet and national song sing, and he says there is no nation in India. That's what he said openly, clearly, and not only India, he said it in Japan and China. So understandable. So I do believe that an excessive nationalism is as dangerous as an excessive masculinization of the state, because the idea of a nation and a nation state is not the idea of patriotism, of old style patriotism. Old style patriotism is a biologically given. If you are born in a certain place, within a certain community, in a certain geographical location, and have a certain kind of socialization typical to the community from which you come, you are going to be automatically patriotic. You will feel more comfortable in that location than in any other location in your life. Ideology and patriotism is also, so it not only comes from childhood, patriotism is biologically based, in the sense not only human beings are patriotic, cats and dogs, they are territorial. So are birds and whales. Whales go from north to south in winter and come back to their own locality. Territoriality is biological. Patriotism is based on that biological instinct, our earliest learnings. Nationalism is not based on biological instinct. Nationalism is an ideology. And as an ideology, nationalism comes to you in your adolescence, where you confront a multiplicity of ideologies, choose one according to your taste. And nationalism is an ideology, fully an ideology. And that nationalism is common all over the world. If you read the literature on nationalism, long ago, cultural anthropologists, psychologists and others found out that if you read carefully in between lines, the ideology of nationalism is all countries is exactly the same. You don't have to read the ideological documents on nationalism of one country and after that you don't have to read, because every country has the same logic, same structure. Now that kind of nationalism demands that you not only love your country territorially, even if you don't love it, at least you have to pretend you love it. Like Savarkar used to say that those who have the sacred land there, they are true Indians, whatever, true Hindus. Though he himself never wanted to be a true Hindu, he was very eager to wear a European suit and so on and so forth. If you read his biography, you will know that. He himself says this. Anyway, the point I am trying to make is this, that in nationalism, you have to not only love the territory, you have to love the allies of your state and also hate the enemies of your state. So your allies and targets of hatred are handed over to you by the state. You cannot run away from it.
ലോകത്തിലെ ലിബറൽ ജനാധിപത്യ രാജ്യങ്ങളിലെല്ലാം തന്നെ എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് തീവ്ര വലതുപക്ഷ രാഷ്ട്രീയം ശക്തമാകുന്നത് എന്ന വിഷയത്തെക്കുറിച്ച് വിശദമായി പ്രൊഫസർ അഷീസ് നന്ദി സംസാരിക്കുവാൻ പോവുകയാണ് അടുത്ത ചോദ്യത്തിന് ഉത്തരമായിട്ട്. ഹൗ ഡു യു റീഡ് ദി എമർജൻസ് ഓഫ് ദി എക്സ്ട്രീം റൈറ്റ് വിങ് പൊളിറ്റിക്സ് ഇൻ ദി യൂറോപ്യൻ ലിബറൽ ഡെമോക്രസീസ്?
This is because they found out the trick. This trick is now being applied even in a country like Pakistan and India. That trick is this, that you gradually work on the majority party to try to convert it into a party or majority, convert the majority carrying the feelings of a minority. You must have the capacity through manipulation of media, through your preachings, through your oratorical skills and so on and so forth, your alterations of history, you bring out a new history for them, you gradually convince the majorities of the country that actually those majority, they have always been a minority in their own country. And then that majority ensures two things. First, that it brings you in a democracy majority, electoral majority, translated, and you can never displace it because it is a majority working as a party, working as an ideological party. The dissolution of the ethical world of the majority, or change it and turn them into a community with a minority complex becomes a dangerous thing. Absolutely. This is fun. The only saving grace is this, in place like India, is this, that it is so diverse that you can never never ensure that fully. In Germany you could. So up to the last, even when Hitler was only owning the capital of Berlin, not even the capital of only a small sector, Berlin, even then young people were willing to die for him. The Hitler youth would become suicide squads in effect. You put that. So they were so allegiant to him. But that cannot be here because the majority here is always divided. India's, if you look at all the elections up to now, you will find that now the participation rate has increased, but even then, 2/3 of Indians only vote. Okay. Secondly, of those who vote in the last election, 36% voted for BJP, 64% of the other parties, and they are behaving as if they own the whole of India. They are totally have the total power and total control of India, and that false confidence is going to be blasted someday or other. Already it's begun to start collapsing in small number of states, but some of the largest states. But it will gradually, it will begin to show the clay feet of the present regime. I am convinced about this.
Now we are getting into our last question. The liberal democracies have given us a dream about the disappearance of national boundaries and getting into a global environment where people love each other, people coexist. But do you think that at the moment all these democracies are redefining their geographical borders to a new kind of a conceptual border?
Yes, that is but that has already been weakened by this. All you can say is this, that at most that borders survive as a survival technique. So you look for new allies, new defiance alliances, new kinds of help from certain countries as opposed to other countries, and so on and so forth. It's a game you play, and it tells you very little about long-time longevity of any regime anywhere in the world. This is the problem, particularly the kind of things we are talking about of Asia, Africa and Latin America. Entire southern hemisphere has this problem, probably except Australia is probably closer to a liberal democracy of the European style. And I would suspect that even there, days of this kind of autocracies, illiberal autocracies passing themselves off as democrats, is unlikely to survive very long. It is not an accident. The first critical book on nation-state system itself has come from Africa, not from Asia or Latin America. And that's the beginning. That's the way people are conscious of the limitations of this nation-state system, and they will try to do their kind of thing. Like in Africa, they will probably make some compromise with our tribes and their way of ruling, because many of the tribes are have some sense of a very different kind of democratic system.
I came here with a pessimistic mindset, but while talking to you, I am also turning into a person of optimism when it comes to the future of democracies, future of democracy in our country.
No, I have faith in this. I have faith in this, the regime, and also in the people to some extent, even though Indians have less critical attitude towards the TV news, and they have less critical attitude of what they read in newspapers, particularly in the local newspapers. And the attempt to silence the voice of the people, attempt is always made to say that deals are made with the publishing houses, that your English newspaper, you can write whatever you want to write, but in your local language, it must support us. That's what the BJP makes the deal.
And thank you for your quality time, Professor Nandi, and we will meet again.
I enjoyed it. Thank you also.